Hi guys, I'm here today with a new episode of Fairy Tales with Jen. If you've missed previous episodes and would like to catch up, then there's a link to the playlist in the description box down below. What I tend to do in these episodes is sit down and talk about a popular fairy tale and the history of it across the centuries. And today I'm going to be talking about Beauty and the Beast. Now, Beauty and the Beast is slightly different to the fairy tales that I've spoken about up until this point because it does have a definitive author. However, there are other tales or motifs that inspired this particular novel. You can trace the history of it, as with most things, to the Greek classics and things like Cupid and Psyche, motifs of love and deception and people being changed. You can also see elements of the Minotaur, the myth of the Minotaur who lives at the middle of a maze, half man, half bull. We have Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, which was written at the end of the 1500s, which uses similar themes in the sense that it has fairies who change the appearance of a man for a joke. So we have the king of the fairies, Oberon, and the queen of the fairies, Titania, and Titania is tricked into falling in love with a man called Bottom who has his head transfigured to be that of a donkey. The novel of Beauty and the Beast was written in the 1700s, and before that came a story called The Pig King, an Italian fairy tale, and that was by Giovanni Francesco Straparola. The Pig King also shows elements of Rapunzel, but that is for another day. So it is about a king and a queen who've been trying to have a child for 7 years, but they have so far not been successful. So one summer evening, the queen decides to sleep outside and 3 fairies stumble upon her, which also harks to A Midsummer Night's Dream. The first fairy says that she will have a son and he will be more beautiful than any in the land. The second promises that her son shall have every virtue, and the third promises that her son will be born with the appearance of a pig until he has been married 3 times. The king and the queen do indeed give birth to a son, and this son is indeed in the form of a pig. The king is so embarrassed and outraged by this that he wants to throw his son off a cliff and kill him, but the queen persuades him that this should not be done and that they should keep him inside the castle where not many people can see him. When the prince becomes older, he demands a wife, so the queen decides that she will pay someone who lives in the village nearby. A woman who has 3 daughters will pay her so that her eldest daughter will marry her son. However, the prince overhears the eldest daughter telling her mother that she plans to kill the prince on their wedding night so that she can inherit some of his fortune because she thinks that he's so unbearably ugly. So on their wedding night, I don't know why he went and married her anyway, but on their wedding night, the prince decides to kill this girl before she kills him. And that's what happens. Must be true love. Finding himself without a bride, the prince demands that he marry the middle child in this family. And exactly the same thing happens. The queen pays the mother to buy the daughter to come and marry her son, and then the prince overhears the girl telling her mother that she's going to kill him because she wants to inherit some of his fortune because she clearly hasn't learnt her lesson from her elder sister and what happens when you do that. So they get married, and then on the wedding night the prince decides to kill his new bride before she can kill him. Again, must be true love. Finding himself without a bride again because he has a nasty habit of killing them, the prince demands the hand of the youngest daughter in marriage, and because her mother seems to enjoy money more than having children, she accepts money from the queen. She agrees to marry him and they happen to be very happy together, and predictably she is the most attractive daughter of the 3. She's called Meldina, and after they've been together several times and they've slept together and they appear to be in love, he decides to show her a secret. He's actually wearing a pig skin that he can now unzip because the curse has been broken. He's been married 3 times. The fairy's prediction has come true, and therefore he can step out of his pig form and become, quote, a beautiful human. In fact, I quote, Meldina was overjoyed to have a handsome man for a husband, and they went on to have a handsome son in human form. Perhaps you can see where this is going. So now let's get onto the novel of Beauty and the Beast by a French writer called Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau de Villeneuve. And this is quite interesting. It's over 100 pages and I have read it, and it has a lot of backstory to the Beast. So the Beast was a boy who was born to a queen and a king, and his dad passed away. Their mother had to become a warrior. She went off to war herself to defend their country. So the young boy was brought up in the castle under the protection of a fairy, and it all got rather strange because his mum was away for a very long time and didn't come back until he was a teenager. And in that time the fairy decided that she didn't just actually like him as a motherly type figure, she actually wanted to marry this boy. Yeah. So the fairy proposed to this teenage boy, who promptly said, "No, thank you very much. You're like a mother figure to me and you've looked after me since I was a toddler, and P.S. can I please have a therapist?" So he refused to marry her. She got very cross and decided to curse him. She decided to turn him into this beastly figure. And she said that because he refused her advances, he was unintelligent and mean. And she was going to show how unintelligent and mean he was by making him look different to everybody else. And the fairy said that one day when a woman proposed to him, the spell would be broken. So he was locked up in this castle. His mother had fled at the sight of him because she was embarrassed at the way her son looked. As well as being a warrior, she was extremely vain and also loved money a lot and was worried that he was not going to be able to marry royalty and keep their country strong. Meanwhile, in a town, which is interesting because lots of fairy tales seem to be set in rural areas, in a town there is a merchant who has 7 sons and 7 daughters, and he has lost all of his money, which is extremely embarrassing. All of his daughters are extremely vain because, you know, they're women, and they just want lots of clothes and pretty things, and are very cross that their father can no longer buy them lots of clothes and pretty things, all apart from the last girl, who happens to be the most beautiful, and she is called Belle, and she is interested in books and in learning, and her sisters think she's stupid. This also has elements of Cinderella in it as well, so if you want to see the history of Cinderella, I'll link that video down below and also up here. So the merchant decides that he needs to go and trade and to make more deals to try and make some more money because he's a bit of an embarrassment in the town right now. So he goes on this adventure journey and he says to his children, "Is there anything that I can bring you back?" And all the girls say, "I would like clothes and diamonds, please, thank you very much," apart from Belle, who says that she would like a rose, a perfect red rose. Oh, Belle, you're going to get your father into so much trouble. So the father, off he goes to do his trade deal, and on the way back on his horse he remembers that he needs to get a rose for Belle, and he stumbles across this house which appears to be empty. He knocks at the door but no one answers, but the door is open so he goes in. There's a roaring fire, there's a bed, there's some food laid out, and he's so tired and so hungry that he decides to eat those things and to sleep in the bed, and he decides he will thank the owner in the morning. In the morning he can't find anyone to thank and goes to leave, and in the garden he finds this beautiful rose bush, so he picks a rose to take home to his daughter. At which point the beast appears and is severely pissed off that this man seems to be just, you know, taking what he likes from his garden, and says, "How dare you? How dare you? I say that you must go home, and whoever you meet first at your house you must bring to me, and they are going to be my captive." And the father says, "That's going to be my youngest daughter Belle because she always runs out to meet me." And the beast says, "So be it." So the father goes home and he finds Belle, who agrees to come and be captive in this castle. And it's very, very strange. You'll notice there are a lot of similarities here between the Beauty and the Beast in this novel and the Disney Beauty and the Beast, which is the one that we're all the most familiar with. But when Belle gets to the castle, there isn't this relationship that the Disney version has whereby the Beast really quite likes her and Belle is somehow locked up in this, you know, Stockholm syndrome where she seems to fall in love with her captor a little bit or admire him somewhat. It's very, very different. So Belle, there's also no animated cutlery, which I'm very sad about, but there is this quite interesting little paragraph where it says that there's lots of noise going on in the kitchen, and I like to think that that's what that's referring to. So Belle is really pissed off to be there, as you would be actually, locked up by this dude who just decided he wanted to keep you for himself. She's really cross. And when she's there is a library, by the way, which she reads from, and the Beast does have a library. While she's there, she has these vivid dreams about a beautiful man. And this man is the most gorgeous man that she's ever seen in her life. And she tells him that she's so sad to be here, locked up with this beast. And he says, "It's okay, one of these days I'll come and save you." Likewise, the Beast doesn't really like Belle very much because he is very annoyed and sad and bitter. But the fairy has visited him and said that she predicts that this girl will help break the spell, so he should really be nice to her. So both of these characters are told to be nice to each other by other characters in the book, but not because they actually want to themselves. It's really, really bizarre. So the Beast keeps on proposing to Belle and saying, "Will you marry me? You know, because I've heard that maybe that's what you're going to do." And Belle's like, "No, I won't marry you. I don't know what you're talking about." And eventually she has a dream where the beautiful man in her dream tells her that she should accept marriage with the Beast. I'm going to find you the actual quote because, I mean, really. In this dream, he is there, but also the fairy appears to her in a dream and says, "Courage, Beauty. Be a model of female generosity. Show yourself to be as wise as you are charming. Do not hesitate to sacrifice your inclination to your duty. You are taking the true path to happiness. You will be blessed, provided you are not misled by deceitful appearances." It goes on. Therefore, the next time that the beast asks you if you will marry him, I advise that you do not refuse him. You have admitted to me that he loves you tenderly. Take the proper means to make your union with him. It is much better to have an amiable husband than one whose only recommendation is a handsome person. How many girls are compelled to marry rich brutes, much more brutish than the beast, who is only one in form and not in his feelings or his accusations? You should marry this man because he wants to marry you. Also, he doesn't hit you, even though he keeps you locked up in his castle. Great advice. Belle hears that her father's very sick and she asks the beast if she can go home and see him, and he says, okay, Beauty, you may do that, but please come back within a week because otherwise I'll pine and die without you. So she goes home and she ends up staying longer than a week because her sisters trick her into doing that. Her sisters are really not very nice people. She comes back over a week later and can't find the beast anywhere, and then finds him collapsed in the courtyard, and she feels so guilty because she's been gone a week that she says, hey, it's all right, I'll marry you because I feel quite bad about it. At which point he wakes up and transforms into the man that she has been dreaming about, this beautiful man. Then the fairy comes back and the queen, and she declares, the fairy, that Beauty is actually related to fairies very conveniently, and it's actually royalty. So therefore they can get married, because the queen was really quite pissed off that Belle was only the daughter of a merchant, but now she's okay because she is somehow related to fairy folk, and fairy folks are higher than royalty in this magical fairy tale setting. So they all get married and live happily ever after. The end. The messages in Beauty and the Beast are slightly strange. I've seen a lot of people talking about Belle as a character who has a lot of agency, as a strong female character, and I can see that in the sense that she does make a lot of her own choices at the beginning, where she wants to learn and she wants to become educated, and she's more interested in that than her sisters, who are doing what society expects of women and who want to bring her down. She is a kind person. However, that seems to stumble a bit when we get into the castle and Belle is focused on the beauty of this man that she's dreaming about. Maybe it's also because he's kind, but she then agrees to marry this man who she doesn't like too much, though she has some respect for, because another man who she thinks is beautiful in her dreams is telling her that that's the appropriate and womanly and feminine thing to do. The idea of two characters with conflicting interests and ideas on life coming together and not liking each other, but being in each other's presence and then forming some kind of mutual respect does translate into future works. We can see similarities between Beauty and the Beast and Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice. I think that Beauty also inspired characters such as Jo in Little Women. Beauty and the Beast isn't the only fairy tale to do this. We can look at Jane Eyre, where you can see elements of Beauty and the Beast, but more on the side of Bluebeard, which is another fairy tale I'll be talking about at some point in the future. However, this idea of badness on the inside being translated into badness on the outside is extremely problematic. It becomes even more troubling when we think of the fact that the character of Beast in Beauty and the Beast was actually inspired by a real person called Petrus Gonsalves, and he was born in Tenerife, and he was taken to the French court. He was sold by his parents to the French court where he could perform, because Petrus was actually born with a condition called hypertrichosis, which is where you are born with lots of hair covering your body. And in the same way that EEC syndrome, what I have, is sometimes referred to as lobster claw syndrome, hypertrichosis was often crudely referred to as werewolf syndrome. Petrus was sent to the court of King Henry II, and from there he also performed at the courts of the Netherlands. He then married a noblewoman there, and they had 7 children together, 4 of whom also had hypertrichosis, and this was seen as somewhat scandalous by people who lived there because most did not deem Petrus as an equal human. They thought he was too other, that he looked too different, and that his appearance was seen as somehow bad. So Petrus is thought to be someone who inspired the character of the Beast. He was often referred to as the man in the woods. So that is the origin of Beauty and the Beast, and obviously there are lots of adaptations that came after that, but that is where it originated. Lots to discuss with regard to deformity and disability being marked as villainous, and something that can be redeemed if you're good enough, that you can be cured, that somehow your outer body appearance reflects who you are within. Lots to think about. I know that many praise Beauty and the Beast as a love story that doesn't have insta-love, but forget about the Disney version for a second and looking back to the origin, of the fairy tale, it actually did have insta-love in the beginning, because Beauty fell immediately in love with this beautiful man that she saw in her dream, who then led her to marry the Beast, as that is the correct feminine thing to do. So it's all very interesting, and a lot of you have been asking me to talk more about the trope of villain having deformity or disability, and this is one of those times. So I hope that you've enjoyed hearing about the history of Beauty and the Beast, and as I said, I'll link the playlist down below if you want to see me talking about the history of other fairy tales as well. If you have requests of fairy tales that you would like me to delve into, do let me know in the comment section down below, and also let me know what you thought about this episode. I hope that you guys are having a great week, and I'll speak to you very soon. Lots of bookish love. Bye.